So good morning, everybody, and I apologize for my bags under my eyes, but as Ergun just said, here is 4 o'clock in the morning, so I'm not completely awakened yet. We can start the ninth section of this conference, which is on the Cappadocia and Early Byzantine period, and specifically on the life in Cappadocia in the text of the Church Fathers. Unfortunately, none of the participants are present in person, and so you will be stuck with me going through the 3 presentations. You will get full of me by the time this session ends. So I guess I will start with the first presentation by Dr. Alexander Minchev and Valeri Yotov, both from the Varna Museum of Archaeology in Bulgaria. And their presentation is about the daily and religious life in Byzantium in the illustration of the homilies of St Gregory of Nazianzus in the manuscript Paris Greek 510, with comparison to some archaeological finds from the Balkans. As I said, the title is The Daily and Religious Life in Byzantium in the Illustration of the Homilies of St. Gregory of Nazianzus, Paris Greek 510, in comparison to some archaeological finds from the Balkans. So I guess I will just go through the slides that the authors provided and read the text with you. So the Homilies of Gregory of Nazianzus is a famous Byzantine illuminated manuscript made in Constantinople for the Emperor Basil I and his family circa 879-882. Of the 465 folios of the manuscript, over 40 have full-page illustration, often spread over several levels for a total of over 200 scenes. This is one of the first imperial luxury-produced manuscript of the Macedonian dynasty, and an exceptional testimony to the art of Byzantine illumination in the 9th century. It is currently kept at the National Library of France and is known as Paris Greek 510. In the word of Leslie Brubaker, in a book published in 1999, Paris Greek 510 is not, in fact, a simple manuscript. It is arguably the most complex and internally illustrated manuscript ever produced in Byzantium. The Paris homilies have been cited more often than any other Byzantine manuscript, and probably more often than any Byzantine monument except Hagia Sophia. The use of Byzantine manuscript for comparing with archaeological artifacts before and now. Even when there was archaeological material available, in the past it was quite difficult to compare it with similar artifacts depicted in the Byzantine art of the period. Wall paintings, mosaics, sculptures, manuscripts, etc. Because the access to most of these art sources was not possible. Until the Second World War, a good part of the Byzantine manuscripts, for instance, were known only to a small group of scholars, mostly art historians, and the available publications were with black and white photos, often with rather bad quality. Only during the past 10 years, due to highly advanced digital technologies, a number of Byzantine manuscripts, like the essential for our topic homilies of St. Gregory of Nazianzus, I guess, were digitized, and specifically on October 21st of 2006. The goal of the presentations. What we needed to say before starting the discussion is that a number of illustrations in the manuscript follow older examples of objects obviously copied from earlier Byzantine written sources, which were also illustrated. This is the reason why, for comparison, we will use some late antique pieces. And they start with the baptismal fonts. Folio 316 recto, healing of the blind at Siloam, parable of the widow's mite, a cross-shaped baptismal font. And you have this page here, and the cross shape is seen in detail over here. Folio 426 verso, mission of the apostle, and of course, as you can see, is clearly straightforward, the different images of the different shaped baptismal fonts. And the comparison here suggested, of course, is the Christian complex in the port town of Cape Atanas near Bala in the Varna region. So the baptistry, of course, the cross-shaped piscina, and the reconstruction of the church. And I apologize, this is really not my field of expertise, so I don't feel I can add anything meaningful to what the authors have put here in the slide. The comparison continue between the scene from the homilies in the manuscript with the parallels from the piscina in Bulgaria. So the complex of the Sliven fortress over here dated to the 6th century AD. And I think it's quite compelling. Then the authors are moving to example of artophoria and censers. Folio 43 versus, seen from the funeral of Casarius. Above, the tabernacle, also known as the artophorion, that is a container on the altar table of an Orthodox Christian church, specifically used to reserve the Eucharist, the presence of Jesus Christ. And here they have a drawing of the artophorium as the censer. Same two objects from folio 32 verso, the martyrdom of the apostles, the artophorion and the censer. And the comparison is with the tabernacle from Izvorele in Romanian, also dated to the 6th century, like the Episcopal Church that we saw before. Regarding the censer, the authors are showing another example from folio 67 verso, Gregory consecrated by, I assume, the Bishop of Sasima. And of course, the detail of the censer in here. And from folio 104 recto, scenes from the life of St. Basil, again, the censer and the drawing of the censer in there. And here, from, of course, the Silistra tomb, dated to the 4th century AD, a servant holding a censer. So the comparison with the archaeological material as they set out at the beginning of the paper. The comparison continues with some bronze censers from the region of Razgrad and from northeast Bulgaria, also dated to the 6th century AD, and a clear drawing from one of the folio that we saw before. We move now to candlesticks. From the folio 43 verses, the scene of the death of Gorgonia and the candlestick, which are placed by the body. And here is their rendering. And here we have the parallels of candlestick from Bulgaria, also from the 6th century AD, from the church treasury, I assume, and from painting again from the tomb in Silistra in Bulgaria, 1 and 2. And of course, the example that they just show us from the manuscript. We move now to knives. And we have folio 174 verses, the sacrifice of Isacco. And over here we have the scene of Isacco, of course, with the father and the knife. And I assume here there was supposed to be a close-up, but I don't see it in my PDF. Oh, here we go. And from another folio, 347 verses, the scene from the life of Samson, we have the detail of the knives. I assume this knife up here. Oh, actually, here, I see the little arrow that they placed. There should be this knife. The authors then insert these two knives from the Divina fortress near Veliko Tarnovo, also dated to the 6th century AD. And we move finally to jugs. Folio 435 verses, Daniel in the lion's den, and a monastery struggling. Here we go. The jug is over here. Here we go. And the comparison of the jug from its Borel in Romania, also dated to the 6th century AD. So the manuscript and the jug. And the conclusion are the parallels of various objects from Bulgaria and Romania, compatible to these shown in the homilies, support the idea that in the Byzantine Empire of the end of the 9th century, the artists who completed the illumination in the manuscript have used available earlier folios, which have been written and illustrated during late antiquity. Okay, so I guess we can move on to the second talk, also for Dr. Valeri Yotov from the Varna Museum of Archaeology in Bulgaria. And her talk is about the homilies of St Gregory of Nazianzus, the same manuscript, Paris, Greek, 510, and specifically the analysis and interpretation of the weaponry and other militant equipment's depiction and their relationship with the archaeological finds. So we will share this other file. Bear with me 1 second. So the homilies of St. Gregory of Nazianzus and the analysis and interpretation of the weaponry and other military equipment's depiction and their relationship with the archaeological finds. Okay, so we're already familiar with the manuscript, which is the same that was discussed in the previous talk, dated WA79 882. And the homilies of Gregory of Nazianzus is a Byzantine illustrated manuscript made in Constantinople for the Emperor Basil I and his family circa A79, 882. Of the 465 folio of the manuscript, over 40 were full-page illustrations, often spread over several levels for a total of over 200 scenes. This is one of the first imperial luxury-produced manuscript of the Macedonian dynasty and an exceptional testimony to the art of the Byzantine illumination in the 9th century. And it is currently, as we said, kept at the National Library of France and known as Paris Greek 510. Hold on, am I reading the same one? Sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm not, no, okay. And we already saw the opinion of Leslie Brubaker regarding the fact that the manuscript is not just a simple manuscript, it is arguably the most complex and internally illustrated manuscript ever produced in Byzantium. And the Paris homilies have been cited more often than any other Byzantine manuscript, and probably more often than any Byzantine monument, except, of course, for Hagia Sophia. The problem with the archaeological material, in the words of Piotr Grotowski, in the book published in 2010, his conclusions are, as with the other items of military equipment, when analyzing the depiction of the sword in Byzantine art, problems are raised by the lack of comparative archaeological material. So the author here is raising the problem of finding comparative material for what is seen in the illuminations. And Raffaele D'Amato is very good informed of Byzantine art and also gave a lot of examples from the homilies of Gregorius of Nazianzus, which however are rather free interpreted. The use of Byzantine manuscript for comparing with the archaeological artifacts. Even when there was archaeological material available, in the past it was quite difficult to compare it with similar artifacts depicted in the Byzantine art of the period. Wall paintings, mosaics, sculptures, manuscripts, etc., because the access to most of these art sources was not possible. Until the Second World War, a good part of the Byzantine manuscripts, for instance, were known only to a small group of scholars, mostly art historians, and the available publications were with black and white photo, often with rather bad quality. Only during the past 10 years, due to highly advanced digital technologies, a number of Byzantine manuscripts, like the essential for our topic, Homilies of St Gregory of Nazianzus, digitized on October 2006, are now available with high-resolution illustration. It is much easier now, also through the direct connection and interchange of data among members of the international scholarly world. In the author's opinion, among thousands of pages of discussion of the homilies of Gregorius of Nazianzus, only a few authors paid attention to characteristics of weapons and armor depicted there. This observation applies, in fact, not only to the homilies, but to most research on Byzantine art. Attention of art historians is usually focused on the modeling of the figures shown and their postures, clothing, landscape, architecture, and so on. The analysis is mostly devoted to features that allow the researchers to compare different objects and thus define their chronology. Generally speaking, while looking at scenes or figures of Byzantine art, authors, in pursuit of their specific task, are content to note, with regard to arms and armors, that there is, and I quote, a red shield with gold border. Behind the emperor, there are two guards with swords. Swords in the end of the angel is blue in color, blue sword in hand, and so on. In practical terms, I must emphasize that no weapons and armor in Byzantine manuscript were subject to any detailed analysis. The weapons and equipment in many scenes of the homilies. And so we see a comparison between folio 374 versos and folio 30, where we can see some weaponry, especially over here, and the weaponry over here, a spear, and so on. There are swords in more than 13 scenes from the homilies, and the author here is selecting some from folio 137 and different folio. I see here folio 239 recto, 215 verso, 227 verso, and etc. And the comparison is within one important type of Byzantine sword, which is the Garabong type. And the sword is coming from the Garabong grave number 55, dated to the middle of the 9th century, south of the Balaton Lake. And we have here the deceased with the weaponry and images and drawing of the weapons themselves, of the swords. Other example of the same type of sword from the 9th century. So the finds are coming from Garabok, Hungary, Kharkiv and Vinica in Ukraine, an unknown find from the Samanid dynasty. I guess we're moving from left to right in the order. Vinica and Cherkasy in Ukraine, and Dinogeția in Romania. And I guess the comparison is with the pommel of the sword itself. And spread of the Garabon type of Byzantine swords in the second half of the 9th centuries in areas around the northern side of the Black Sea, and one example in Iran as well. We're going back to the homilies and the manuscript, 510, and we see illustration and miniatures with the Garabong type of Byzantine swords. In this image, on the left of the folio 137 recto over here, and in the folio 215 verso over here. We also continue seeing scene in the miniatures with the Garabong type of Byzantine sword in the scene of the massacre of the innocent, folio 137 recto, and the image is pretty much self-explanatory. The illumination, the drawing, and the image of one of the archaeological finds that we saw before. Same for the scene of Solomon judgment in folio 215 verso, the detail, the drawing, and of course the archaeological find. And again in folio 226 verso and in folio 332 verso. Even if I don't see it immediately, I have to confess. Oh, over here, I assume. So we have here a detail of the miniature of Joshua meeting the angel from folio 222 verso. Okay, over here is the angel and the detail of the sword and the pommel of the sword itself. And the same from the miniature of the scene of the life of Cyprian, folio 332 verso. Here, and the rendering. Even more from folio 239, Gregory and the Emperor Theodosius. Over here, the detail over here. And the miniature scene from the lives of Constantine and Helena from folio 440 recto. And the swords over here. In the words of Piotr Grotowski, long swords with unusually decorative scabbards rest on the shoulders of the protospataroi, accompany San Helena and the Emperor Theodosio on folios 239 rector and 440 rector of the Parisian homilies of the Gregorius of Nazianzus. And I guess the comparison here is with the Tetrarchy monument, which of course is in Venice, as you all know. And finally, in terms of horseman equipments, we have images of stirrups in more than 3 or 4 seen in the homilies, seen from the life of Julian the Apostate in folio 409 verso, here, and of course the rendering, and the same thing, scenes from the life of Constantine and Helena, folio 440 recto, and we see the detail of the stirrup in there. And the comparison with this pair of stirrups of triangular shape found in the Magyar necropolis dated to the second half of the 10th century with incrustation of fishes and wine glasses. Notes of conclusion. First, the weapons and equipment depicted in Byzantine art monuments are usually mostly stylized. In the relatively small size scenes and images of saints, soldiers, especially executioner, in the manuscripts are often shown, but for example, the sword blades are presented just as a longer straight line, and the sword guard like a short line. In this sense, the homilies of Gregory of Nazianzus is an exception. Second, pointing the attention to well-dated Byzantine art parallels will help on the one hand to add arguments in support of the dating of weapons or swords discovered either by excavation or found by chance. This goes especially for those already determined in a group or type. Third, at the same time, this many archaeological study may help the scholars to deal namely with Byzantine art images, to derive new conclusions about their dating, to determine some possible groups of masters of the miniatures, frescoes, etc. And this concludes the second presentation. Any comments about these two? Meanwhile, I'm getting the file from the third one.
Amazing, amazing, Roberta, that you still keep working and you still keep reading and doing the best job. Wow, I'm just like sort of admired. Thank you for that.
I don't know if I'm doing them justice. That's the problem. They put so much.
You did an excellent job. We all enjoy it. Thank you.
The final talk for this session is by Professor Tomasz Polański from the Polska Academy Nauk in Crakow, Poland. And his talk is about St Mercurius bier and the acheiropoieton of Kamoulia, the early Byzantine archaeologists in Coptic and Syriac texts. Here we are. Okay. Again, I'm afraid I'm not the best qualified person to look through this PowerPoint since this is not my period of expertise. I hope that the author put some test to go with the images. Otherwise, it's going to be quite a short presentation. Ergun, did you send any paper with this?
Well, Roberta, I know Professor Polański very well for a long time. I was teaching in Crakow too, in his institute.
So maybe you should take over for this one.
Yeah, all I can say, he always does that type of lectures with combining his excursions and then just putting some sort of, the type of pictures from his excursions combining with some ancient sources. Let us just show it, and I think it's nice to see those pictures. Even though I just called him this morning, but maybe he just arrived. I don't know. He was just trying to sort of arrange it with the Zoom, but and these are like from his young ages, I guess. I don't know if anybody knows Professor Polański from Crakow. He's also teaching in Kielce, not far away from Crakow. And this is his wife. She's working in the Catholic monastery, in the library of Catholic monastery in Crakow. She's a librarian, actually. And they basically had a long journey in Asia Minor, in Syria and other places, as a sort of a small Polish, group of tourists who have just sort of an interest to Oriental cultures. Yes, you can see from Crakow, right? From the KR. They're all from Crakow. And what Professor Polański does is he mostly worked on the iconographic imaginations plus some written sources, especially Aramaic sources. And, he creates something very, I would say, exclusive for Byzantine studies. But I cannot say what it is all about, actually. It looks like so many things together.
Are in the audience that can chip in?
Yeah. Well, then we got a Greek text. Wow. I like this. I like this style. But I don't know what is. Maybe I should check if he hasn't. But he didn't send me any text, though. That is a problem. He didn't send me any text. Let me check again. No, unfortunately not. He didn't send me any compiling text.
Is there an abstract?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Maybe Roberta would like to read it. Do you think, Roberta, would you like to read it?
Right. I didn't think about it before.
That's a good idea, by the way. Thank you. Yeah.
Let me grab it. Yes, here we go. So the abstract says that at the end of the Coptic 8th miracle of St. Mercurius the General, a martyr that was executed circa in 250 in Caesarea Massaca, we find a description of Curis Hermopolis' votive offering located in St. Mercury's sanctuary of Caesarea. It was a bier of pine wood logs adorned with carved ivory plaques and the martyr's icon fixed to it. In a Syriac historical compilation composed by an anonymous author from Amida, before AD 568 or 569, we learn about the Kamoulia acheiropoieton, icon of Jesus. We read in the text that during Christ's lifetime, a woman from Kamoulia near Caesarea found an image of Jesus on a linen cloth in a fountain of water in her garden. The story combines the two main varieties of the acheiropoieta, a celestial image and its copy or imprint. The two most famous acheiropoieta of the pre-iconoclastic period appear roughly at the same time in the mid-6th century in their own sanctuaries in Syria, Phrygia, and Cappadocia. In both Coptic and Syriac texts, we find some interesting words and phrases referring to the visual arts. And this is what we have. And they also made the bier of pine wood logs and carved iron plaques, and thus made the bier and fixed it to the martyr's icon adorned with jewels, sparkling beautifully, together with 3 crosses of gold and 3 strages of silver. They made the remaining components beautiful and perfected every detail. Badge's rendering bypassed the difficulties in the interpretation of the jewels. They are actually given a characteristic feature, probably a very beautiful or sparkling, from Nai to C, but I am not sure of the exact meaning. The Coptic text does not mention 3 crosses of gold and 3 crosses of silver, as translated by Budge, but 3 crosses of gold and 3 sphreges, perhaps medallions. Probably the words stand for the equivalent of the Syriac word, which I cannot read, I'm sorry, translated by now as so sphreges or seals. And we have here a comparison, I guess, with the medallions and a parapet.
This is from Louvre.
Yeah, by all means, step in. I understand it's the bier of pine wood logs. Pine logs, broken pieces, or wood inlaid, and refers to carved ivory plaques. The bier, literally the place of sleep, and the martyr's icon studded with precious stones. Of course, I will not be able to read any of this. Hypatia noticed in a fountain which was in the garden the image of our Lord Jesus impressed on a linen cloth, which was in the water. And when she took it out, she was surprised that it was now wet. And out of esteem, she hid it in her head cover. Next, she came to that man who taught her and showed it to him. And they also found in her headdress another and exactly the same image which was in the water. One icon was sent to Caesarea sometime after the Passion of our Lord, while the other was kept in the village of Kamoulia. And a church was built there out of veneration by Hypatia, who was baptized. Sometimes later, another woman from the village Divodin, which has been already mentioned above in the district of Amasya, when she learned about it, she somehow came into the possession of one of the imprints of the icon from Kamoulia, stimulated by a religious zeal, and transferred it to her own village. They label it in this region acheiropoieton, that is, the one not made by human hands. Kitzinger believed that he had deciphered some important information from the concluding section of the Syriac sermon. He followed Hamilton and Brooks' reading, Lauraton. They interpreted it as a breathed image. Kitzinger concluded that the author of the Syriac text had actually referred to the image of Christ as a lauraton, which is technically a term from the portrait of the ruler. In other words, the Kamoulian icon seemed to have been modeled on the imperial portraits. In my opinion, either Nöldeke, who read it as Leorte, or Harens and Kruger, who read it as Lorates, were right reading that letter as for to in glory of, not as one word, laurator. And here is Hamilton's rendering followed by Kitzinger. And the same thing is a type of the progress of the mystery and picture and breathed image of the King and Lord of those above and those below, which shall be quickly revealed. The Syriac aorto means basically something which can be seen, a visible image, an image accessible to sight. That is my proposal. Nöldeke's reading of the word as eorte, that is celebrations or feast, is not to be despised either. Similarly, the rendering of our hands, orates, or epiphany, revelation, or apparition, is actually close to my understanding of the word. Now we can read it again. The procession with the mystery and the image with its celebration, or its epiphany, does make sense. The procession with the mystery, literally his mystery, the mystery of Christ's appearance, and the icon which can be seen in public, the icon of the King and Lord of heaven and earth, and is a sign that it will soon come again. An icon over here. The Pantocrator, I guess.
No, this is John the Baptist from the Kiev Museum of Varvara and Hanenka. It originally comes from Sinai. And this is Cosmas and Damian, yes, two saints that were famous for being doctors. This is also an icon, an early icon, pre-iconoclastic icon, 6th century, that originally comes from Sinai and today in Kiev.
Okay.
I think he shows this as an example of early images that I mean, to show what the Kamoulian image may have looked like, and also that the images of Christ on these icons may in this or that way refer and convey the way the Christ was represented on the Kamoulian image. And this icon is much later. It's from the Trettikov Gallery in Moscow. This is a 12th century piece with an image of Mendelian, which represents another acheiropoieton icon known in the Byzantine world, and that is the Mendelian that was kept first in Constantinople and then was taken to the West. I mean, originally it was kept in Odessa, then moved to Constantinople and then to the West. But not this icon, it reproduces the one I'm talking about. This is an image of Christ from Cosmas and Damian in Rome. It's 6th century, early 6th century image of Christ descending, kind of the Last Judgment image of Christ, Last Judgment descending from heaven. That also might be contemporary to the Kamoulian image and hence convey the image that we lost together with the original piece.
I'm sorry, my God. Okay, so yeah, this way. Okay. Latumus, a Greek borrowing in Syriac. John of Ephesus explained the term as sule, stone cutters. Mauritius also sent masons, carpenters, and engineers. If this is the correct reading of ergolaboi, as speculates by Brooks, Mauritius also enlisted ironsmith and a category of craftsmen labeled as constructor, engineer, mechanikoi. The imperial donation included golden altar vessels, which people admire. A large ciborium, a baldachin adorned with the central aisle. It was modeled on the ciboria of the churches in the imperial capital of Constantinople, as John comments. Serione were also sent and installed in the church. Were they ornamental bronze plate, lorica? A spacious Xenodokion, a pilgrim's hotel, which consisted of a number of buildings, according to John, was also included in the architectural design of the imperial town. The emperor did not forget to build an amsin, which was of an appropriate size for such an important town. What this was, I do not know. Brooks conjectures that John of Ephesus meant an aerarium. The structural plan of the new Arabisks also entailed long and monumental porticos, spacious basilicas, and a palace, which was certainly an imperial residence. The whole town was strongly fortified. And I guess we're seeing here fortifications.
Demek ki şey yapmıyordu, bakmıyordu. Çok emin değilim ya, çok emin değilim. O zaman demin biz şey duyduk, ne bileyim ben bayağı bir ses duydum etrafta ya.
Okay, we have more desert scene. And that's the end of it. I want to personally apologize to Professor Polański for doing such a poor job with this presentation, but it's so out of my realm of expertise that I don't really think I can do anything else with it. So I guess since none of the authors are present, if we want to open the floor for those of you that are actually dealing with this material, maybe you can have a conversation about what we just see. As I said, I don't think I can add anything meaningful to the topic itself. Ergun?
I'm still here. I'm still here. Well, yeah, should we maybe, I don't know, do some comments about that, or no? This is not necessary. What would you say? Well, the people are not here. Normally, they would be here. The problem was that, well, Professor Polański had a problem with the connection, with the internet connection, which I can understand because I think he's now in Kielce, not in Crakow, where he has this landscape house, perhaps with like weak internet connection. And the problem with the Bulgarian colleagues from Varna, I think they have a plan of today. They need to do something. This is what they say. So these are all I know, actually.
Well, thank God for Professor Polański at the very time, because if he saw me butchering his talk like that, never talk to me ever again.
Well, I can tell you, he is doing such an exotic job normally, because there are very few people who are able to combine Aramaic and Greek sources to each other. So he's one of the experts, especially in the eastern part of Europe. He's one of the very few one, actually, doing that type of job. And at the same time, he's also using iconographic and some other type of depictions for his conclusion, for his synthesis. So he's an important guy, I would say. He's also the editor of Folia Orientalia. This is an old traditional Polish journal from 1940s up to now, without any break, because in Poland there is one Oriental Institute based in Crakow, actually, and this is annual, and he's the editor of this annual. So he has such a great expertise for the Oriental stuff. But for the other two colleagues from Varna, I did not meet them in person. I'm sorry about that. Maybe our Bulgarian colleague Anton knows them. Anton Genov. What would you say, Anton?
Hello, everybody. Unfortunately, I don't know them, and I don't know are they online or not. But if you say we can start the session.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we have a break, Roberta, what do you think?
Yes, you all need a break from me.
Maybe a lunch break.
No. We don't need a break for you. No. You have done a great job. No.
I thank all of you for being so gracious. And again, I want to apologize.
Of course we are.
Author of the free paper. I hope I did, I did the best I could considering.
This was great. This was just great. A new business field for you. Talking for other people.
With bad accents.
No, I enjoy it. I definitely enjoy it. One of my best friends is actually Italian, from Udine, so I always like this in English.
I think you all deserve a coffee after me, I would say.
No, just saying. So let us have a break. Melich, what would you say, Melich? Where are you, Melich? Melich is our music guy and also my co-organizer of this conference.
Hello, I'm here.
You're here, there. Good. What would you say? Should we have a break, or what do you think?
Okay. So before session 3, I think
there is a break time, right? Because I cannot open the words right now. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
So how long is this break, Melich? How long is it?
Okay, so it's supposed to start at 12, so it will continue till 1:30 p.m.
Good.
It's like lunch break,
Okay, perfect. So why don't we have our music then and start the lunch?
Okay.
Yeah.
So 1 hour or 1.5 hours?
Well, I would say yeah, like just we'll continue with the program, I think, right? Don't you think?
Okay.
Or yeah, it's better that way.
So
Because
right
1
now
hour is just not enough, I would say. Well, I don't
Okay,
want to
so-
decide on my own. Everybody is just welcome to share their opinion about that. Well, I would say, what would you say, Roberta? I think we should just keep the program, or should we skip it, or what would you say? What would you suggest?
I don't know. I would say the next chairman should.
I'll decide about it. Anton, you're the guy. You're the decider guy. Tell us, what would you like to do?
Okay, if we start at 12:30.
12:30. Okay, let's do that. Good.
so half an hour break.
40
Some kind of
minutes. 40
minutes.
Let's make a Turkish deal. 40 minutes. 30 plus 10.
Great.
Let's
Okay.
make a Turkish deal here.
40 minutes, okay.
Good. 12:30 then, I would say. Okay, let's have a break right now. Thank you very much to everybody, and see you soon, hopefully, inshallah, I say.
You're welcome. See you.